The wooden box hit the dumpster with a crack that silenced 30 wedding guests. Kinsley screamed, "This is junk!" But I knew what was inside. My hands shook as I watched 50 years of memories bounce off metal. That antique jewelry box, walnut wood with brass corners, held more than old earrings and necklaces. Hidden beneath the velvet lining were the original deed to my Valdosta home, my late husband's military discharge papers, and something Kinsley didn't know existed. A copy of Landon's bankruptcy filing from 2018. The champagne in my glass had gone flat. Cold metal folding chairs pressed against my back as wedding guests turned their heads like they were watching a tennis match. Some laughed nervously, others pulled out phones. Landon stood frozen by the cake table, his face white as his new wife's dress. "Grandma's things belong in the trash where they came from," Kinsley announced to anyone still listening. Her voice carried that sharp edge I'd noticed during our first meeting 6 months ago, the one that appeared whenever Landon wasn't looking. I counted my heartbeats 1, 2, 3, and measured the distance to the parking lot. 47 steps. The same number of years I'd been married to Sterling before the cancer took him. The same number of roses I planted around our front porch each spring. Kinsley's heels clicked against the concrete as she marched back toward the reception tent. Her dress train swept behind her like she owned the whole venue. Maybe she thought she did. Maybe after today, she'd own a lot more than that. The DJ booth sat 20 feet from the dumpster. Preston, a young man Landon hired to save money on wedding music, kept his equipment running even as guests whispered and pointed. His camera stayed focused on the dance floor, but I noticed something. The red recording light never went off. "Mrs. Dubois?" A server approached with another glass of champagne. "Are you all right?" I nodded because speaking would have cracked my voice. The server walked away, and I stayed in my seat. Other guests started moving around again, finding their tables, pretending nothing happened. But weddings have a way of showing people's true selves, and what I'd just seen made my stomach turn cold. That jewelry box traveled with me from Jacksonville when Sterling got stationed at Moody Air Force Base in 1971. It held our wedding rings while he deployed to Vietnam. It kept Landon's baby teeth and report cards safe through 3 moves and 2 promotions. When Sterling died 4 years ago, I placed his Purple Heart inside, right next to the deed that proved our house belonged to me alone. Kinsley knew what was in that box. I'd shown her everything during our second dinner together, back when she was playing the role of loving future daughter-in-law. She'd held each document with careful hands, asking questions about property taxes and insurance policies. Sweet questions, I thought then. Interested questions from a woman who wanted to understand her new family's history. Now I understood why she'd been so interested. Landon appeared at my table, his tie crooked and sweat beading on his forehead. "Mom, I'm sorry about Kinsley. She's just stressed about the move and—" "What move?" His mouth opened, then closed. Around us, the wedding reception continued. Music played, people danced, cake got served. But something had shifted, like when storm clouds gather before the sky opens up. "We'll talk later," Landon mumbled, then walked away toward his new wife. If this betrayal at a family celebration chills you, subscribe now. You'll need to see how deep this goes. As Kinsley stormed toward the parking lot, someone behind the DJ booth kept filming. If someone destroyed your family heirloom at their own wedding, would you stay silent or speak up? Comment "silence" or "speak." My key didn't work. After 50 years in my own home, I stood on my porch like a stranger begging to come inside. The dialysis appointment had run late. 3 hours hooked to machines that cleaned my blood while I watched game shows on the clinic's fuzzy television. Mrs. Gable from down the street had driven me home, same as every Tuesday for the past 8 months since my kidneys started failing. "You sure that's the right key, honey?" Mrs. Gable squinted through her windshield. I tried again. The key slid into the lock but wouldn't turn. Something's wrong. Through the kitchen window, I could see Landon standing at my stove. He was stirring something in my favorite pot, the cast iron one Sterling bought me for our 10th anniversary. But Landon wasn't alone. Kinsley moved around my kitchen like she owned it, opening cabinets, rearranging my coffee cups. Mrs. Gable waited while I knocked on my own front door. The sound felt hollow and strange. This morning when I left for treatment, that door opened with the same key I'd used for decades. Now it might as well have been a stranger's house. Landon finally answered. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. Mom, Kinsley changed the locks. For security. With all the break-ins in the neighborhood. What break-ins? I pushed past him into my living room. Everything looked different. My family photos had been moved from the mantel to a side table. Different throw pillows covered my couch. Even the smell was wrong, vanilla candles instead of the lavender potpourri I'd kept in the same dish since 1985. Kinsley appeared from the hallway, carrying an armload of my clothes. Eleanor, how was your appointment? I've been organizing while you were out. Your closet was such a mess. My clothes housedresses Sterling used to say looked pretty. Cardigans I'd worn to church for 20 years hung over Kinsley's arm like rags headed for donation. Those are my Sunday dresses. Were, Kinsley corrected with a smile that never reached her eyes. I picked out some nicer things for you, more modern styles. Landon drove me to the mall after lunch. The coffee table held stacks of mail I'd never seen. Bills addressed to Kinsley Davidson Dubois, as if she'd lived here for years instead of days. A home equity application sat on top, partially filled out in handwriting that wasn't mine. Landon, we need to talk, privately. My son glanced at Kinsley, who nodded like she was giving him permission to speak to his own mother. Mom, Kinsley's just trying to help. With your medical expenses and the house repairs. What house repairs? Kinsley stepped forward. The roof needs work. The kitchen appliances are ancient. The plumbing makes those terrible noises. Landon and I discussed it, and since I have experience with home improvement projects, it makes sense for me to handle the renovations. Experience. Kinsley worked part-time at a nail salon and lived in a rented apartment with 3 roommates before she married Landon. What experience? I'm going to rest in my bedroom. Actually, Kinsley's voice stopped me at the hallway entrance. I moved your things to the guest room. The master bedroom gets better light, and with Landon's back problems, he needs the firmer mattress. Landon's back problems. He'd never mentioned back problems during our weekly dinners. Never winced getting up from chairs or asked for heating pads. But now, suddenly, he needed my bedroom. The guest room smelled like mothballs and felt cramped. My clothes, what remained after Kinsley's organizing, hung in a narrow closet that barely fit 10 hangers. On the nightstand sat a glass of water and 2 pills I didn't recognize. For your blood pressure, Kinsley called from the doorway. The doctor prescribed them this morning. I hadn't seen a doctor this morning. I'd been at dialysis. My phone buzzed with a text message from Landon. Kinsley has spare key. She's helping with expenses. No apology, no explanation. DJ Preston sent the message at 2:17 a.m. Mrs. Dubois, you need to see this video. They didn't know I was still recording. I couldn't sleep anyway. The guest room mattress felt lumpy compared to my old bed, and Kinsley's vanilla candles made my sinuses burn. Every creak in the house sounded different from this side of the hallway. After midnight, I'd heard voices in the kitchen, Kinsley and Landon talking in whispers that stopped whenever footsteps passed the guest room door. My phone screen glowed in the darkness. Preston had sent a video file along with his message. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m., right after Kinsley threw my jewelry box in the dumpster. The video started shaky, like Preston was adjusting his phone while packing up DJ equipment. Wedding reception sounds filled the background, distant music, clinking glasses, laughter from guests who'd already forgotten about my grandmother's antique box, lying in pieces among garbage bags and leftover catering supplies. But Preston hadn't forgotten. His camera focused on the dumpster area, where 2 figures moved in the shadows cast by the reception tent's lighting. Kinsley and a man in a dark suit I didn't recognize from the wedding. Can you see the documents clearly? The man's voice came through my phone's speaker, tinny but understandable. Kinsley climbed halfway into the dumpster, her white dress bunched around her knees. She pulled out pieces of my jewelry box, broken wood, scattered papers, the brass corners that had held everything together since 1971. Here's the deed, Kinsley said, holding up a folded paper. Original property transfer from 1974. And look, she waved another document. His bankruptcy papers from 2018. Landon never told his mother about those. The man photographed each paper with his own phone. Professional movements like he'd done this before. What about the insurance policy? Life insurance worth $200,000, Kinsley confirmed. Current beneficiary is Landon, but that changes tomorrow. I've got the paperwork ready. My hand started shaking. I paused the video, rewound it, listened again. $200,000. Sterling's life insurance policy that was supposed to help Landon with college expenses and medical bills after I died. Kinsley knew about it. More than knew about it, she had plans for it. The video continued. Kinsley climbed out of the dumpster, her dress stained with garbage juice and torn along one side. She didn't seem to care. "Transfer papers ready by Tuesday?" the man asked. "Everything's in motion," Kinsley replied. Eleanor signed the property documents last week, thinking they were medical consent forms. Landon signed where he was supposed to, clean legal transfer to the family trust. What family trust? What property documents? I'd signed medical papers for my dialysis treatments, insurance forms for prescription coverage. Nothing about property transfers or family trusts. But Kinsley's voice continued through my phone speaker, clear and cold. "The old woman won't last long anyway. Kidney failure, diabetes, high blood pressure. Her doctor gives her maybe 2 years. By then, everything will be transferred and protected." The man in the suit nodded. "What about the son?" Kinsley's laugh sounded harsh. "Landon does whatever I tell him. Always has. He thinks I married him for love." She kicked at a piece of my broken jewelry box. "Poor fool has no idea what love costs these days." The video ended. Preston had stopped recording when the two figures walked back toward the reception tent, leaving my family's papers scattered in the dumpster like trash. I sat in that narrow guest room bed until sunrise, watching the video over and over. Each time, Kinsley's words hit harder. "The old woman won't last long anyway. If hidden recordings like this make your skin crawl, subscribe. The evidence gets darker." The man in the suit photographed each document before Kinsley nodded. His voice, "Transfer papers ready by Tuesday." Rowan Pierce didn't flinch when I showed her the video. Her pen stayed steady as she wrote "Elder Fraud" in capital letters. The legal aid office smelled like old coffee and copy machine toner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Rowan's desk, where legal textbooks competed for space with client files and empty takeout containers. This wasn't the polished law firm I'd imagined when Mrs. Gable drove me here Wednesday morning, but Rowan's reputation in Valdosta was solid. "How long has Kinsley been living in your house?" Rowan asked without looking up from her notepad. 6 days, since the wedding. "And she changed the locks immediately?" "Tuesday. While I was at dialysis." Rowan's pen moved across the page in quick, efficient strokes. She wore a simple gray dress and reading glasses that had seen better days, but her questions cut straight to the heart of things. No wasted words, no false sympathy, just legal facts building toward something I couldn't see yet. "The video mentions property documents you supposedly signed. Do you remember signing anything recently besides medical forms?" My mind went back through the past month. Dialysis clinic paperwork, insurance updates, prescription authorizations. Kinsley brought me papers 2 weeks ago, said they were updated medical directives in case something happened during treatment. "Where did you sign them?" "Kitchen table." Landon was there too. They both said it was routine paperwork every kidney patient needed to complete. Rowan finally looked up. Her brown eyes held the same steady calm as her handwriting. "Mrs. Dubois, medical directives don't require property transfers. Someone lied to you." She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a business card. "I'm calling Corbin Hayes. He's a forensic accountant who specializes in elder financial abuse. If Kinsley and her associate have been forging documents, Corbin will find the paper trail." "Is that expensive?" "I don't have money for—" "Legal aid covers the consultation. Corbin owes me a favor from a case last year." Rowan dialed the number. "Corbin?" "Rowan Pierce. I need you to look at something." While Rowan explained the situation, I studied the military medals Sterling had earned in Vietnam. I'd brought them from the jewelry box remnants, thinking they might serve as character evidence. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Good Conduct Medal. Proof that our family understood honor and sacrifice, values Kinsley clearly didn't share. Rowan hung up. "Corbin can meet us Friday morning. He'll need bank records, any property documents you can find, and copies of everything Kinsley had you sign. The papers are at my house. Can you get them without Kinsley knowing?" I thought about the guest room where I now slept, the changed locks, the way Kinsley watched my every movement. "She goes to work Thursday mornings. Nail salon opens at 10. Rowan wrote, Thursday, document retrieval on her notepad. I'm also recommending we file an emergency motion to freeze any property transfers pending investigation. 3 counties, Rowan said. Kinsley filed identical trust papers in 3 different counties. Corbin's computer screen showed my signature on documents I'd never seen, dated weeks before Kinsley even met Landon. His office occupied the 2nd floor of an old building downtown, above a pawn shop and across from the courthouse. Unlike Rowan's cramped legal aid space, Corbin's office felt organized and precise. 3 computer monitors displayed bank records, property filings, and document comparisons that made my head spin. Your signature appears on 5 different documents, Corbin explained, pointing to photocopies spread across his desk. Property transfer agreements, trust establishment papers, beneficiary changes on insurance policies. But look at these dates. The documents were dated March 15th, March 22nd, and April 3rd. Kinsley didn't meet Landon until April 10th at the hardware store, where he worked part-time stocking shelves. That's impossible, I said. I never signed anything in March, and Kinsley wasn't even in the picture then. Corbin opened a manila folder. Bank records show something interesting. Landon took out a payday loan in February for $1,500. The payment went to a company called Family Trust Legal Services in Atlanta. What kind of company? The kind that helps people create legal documents quickly and cheaply. No questions asked, minimal verification required. Corbin's fingers moved across his keyboard. They specialize in elder care paperwork, estate planning, and property transfers. Rowan leaned forward in her chair. Someone paid them to create fake documents with Eleanor's forged signature? That's exactly what happened. The metadata on the digital files shows they were created in February, weeks before Eleanor supposedly signed them. But here's the interesting part. Corbin pointed to another screen. The same company has processed identical paperwork for families in Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. Same document templates, same trust structure, same targeting of elderly homeowners. My stomach felt heavy. Landon planned this before he even introduced me to Kinsley? Corbin showed me 2 signatures side by side, one authentic from my bank records, one from the trust documents. Close, but not identical. The forged version showed subtle differences in letter formation and pen pressure. Professional forgery, but not perfect, Corbin said. Whoever did this had samples of your real signature to work from, but they couldn't match the pressure patterns or natural hand tremor that comes with age. Rowan made notes in her legal pad. What about the home equity loan Kinsley mentioned in the video? Corbin pulled up another screen. Approved for $85,000 against Eleanor's property. Kinsley withdrew $40,000 3 days after the wedding. The remaining $45,000 sits in an account she controls. My house isn't worth $85,000, I protested. Actually, recent property assessments show it's worth about $120,000. Kinsley knew exactly what she was doing. Corbin printed several pages of bank records. She also applied for credit cards using Eleanor's Social Security number and property as collateral. If document fraud terrifies you, subscribe now, this gets more calculated. The home equity loan was approved for $85,000. Kinsley had already withdrawn $40,000. Digital documents don't lie, Corbin said, pointing to creation dates that proved everything was fabricated. His fingers moved across the keyboard like a concert pianist, pulling up screens full of code and timestamps that looked like gibberish to me but apparently told Corbin everything he needed to know. The coffee in my cup had gone cold while I watched him work, but I couldn't look away from what he was discovering. These trust documents were created on February 18th at 3:47 p.m., Corbin explained, pointing to a line of text on his monitor. But look at this, the Microsoft Word properties show they were modified 17 times between February and April. What does that mean? Someone kept changing the details. Adding your property address, updating the beneficiary information, refining the legal language. This wasn't a one-time forgery. This was careful, methodical planning. Rowan leaned closer to the screen. Can you track who made the changes? Corbin opened another window. Better than that, I can show you exactly which computer created these files. He pulled up something called an IP address lookup. All the modifications came from a laptop registered to Kinsley's apartment complex. Same wireless network, same device signature. My heart sank lower with each revelation. Landon's new wife hadn't just stumbled into fraud, she'd been crafting it for months while pretending to fall in love with my son. There's more, Corbin continued. The notary stamps on these documents were purchased from an online vendor called Legal Supplies Express. Fake stamps, designed to look official but completely worthless legally. How do you know they're fake? Corbin pulled up the Georgia Secretary of State website. Real notary registrations are public record. The stamp on your documents belongs to someone named Brinley Shaw, but she lives in California and her commission expired in 2019. Rowan made notes in her legal pad. Federal crime? Multiple federal crimes, mail fraud, wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft. And since Kinsley filed these documents in multiple states, it becomes a federal conspiracy case. The room fell quiet except for the hum of Corbin's computers. I stared at the screens showing Kinsley's digital fingerprints all over my stolen life. Every forged signature, every fake document, every lie told to my son, it was all there in cold, undeniable computer code. How long does someone go to prison for this? I asked. Corbin and Rowan exchanged glances. For elder fraud at this level? 5 to 10 years minimum? Rowan said. But if we can prove she was planning to harm you physically to collect the insurance money, it could be much longer. The fake notary stamps alone carry a mandatory minimum, Corbin added. Federal judges don't have discretion to reduce those sentences. I thought about Kinsley moving around my kitchen, changing my locks, sleeping in my bedroom, all while planning to steal everything I'd worked 50 years to build. Did you know fake notary stamps are traceable through purchase records? Federal crime, Rowan confirmed. Fake notary stamps carry mandatory prison time. The life insurance policy had my forged signature, making Kinsley the sole beneficiary. $200,000 waiting for me to die. Rowan spread the documents across her conference table like a poker player revealing a winning hand, except this hand showed someone betting on my death. The insurance policy Sterling bought in 1995 to protect Landon after I passed away now had Kinsley's name where Landon's should be. When did you supposedly sign this beneficiary change? Rowan asked, pointing to a date on the form. March 30th. But I was in the hospital that week with kidney complications. I couldn't have signed anything. Corbin pulled up hospital records on his laptop. Admitted March 28th. Discharged April 2nd. Medical staff notes show she was sedated most of that week due to dialysis complications. So this signature was forged while I was unconscious in a hospital bed? Rowan nodded grimly. And look at this, the witness signature belongs to Landon. He confirmed the beneficiary change while you were fighting for your life. My son had signed papers redirecting my life insurance to his new wife while I lay hooked to machines, not knowing if I'd survive another round of treatment. The betrayal cut deeper than any kidney failure ever could. There's something else, Corbin said quietly. The insurance company received a phone call on April 15th asking about claim procedures. Someone wanted to know exactly what documentation would be needed to collect the death benefit. April 15th. 3 days after Kinsley met Landon at the hardware store. She'd been researching how to collect on my death before they'd even gone on their first date. Rowan flipped through more pages. Your military widow benefits were also redirected. Kinsley would receive your Social Security survivor benefits, your veterans' health care coverage, and your pension payments from Sterling's service. How much total? Including the life insurance, property value, and monthly benefits, approximately $400,000 over time. 400,000 reasons for Kinsley to want me dead. I thought about the pills she'd been giving me, claiming they were for blood pressure. The way she encouraged me to skip dialysis appointments when I felt tired. The concerned looks she gave Landon when she thought I wasn't watching, suggesting my condition was worse than doctors were telling me. Eleanor. Rowan's voice was gentle but urgent. Do you feel safe in that house? I remembered Kinsley's voice on Preston's video. The old woman won't last long anyway. Her doctor gives her maybe 2 years. Not sadness in her voice, impatience. She's been giving me pills, says they're prescribed, but I never saw any doctor prescribe them. Rowan and Corbin exchanged worried glances. Corbin reached for his phone. I'm calling Agent Monroe at the FBI. This case just became attempted murder. If someone changed your beneficiary without permission, what would you think their intentions were? This level of calculated betrayal should terrify anyone. Subscribe to see how Eleanor fights back. Rowan's question hung in the air. Eleanor, do you feel safe in that house? Judge Albright signed the emergency order in 30 seconds. All property transfers frozen immediately, she announced. The courthouse smelled like old wood and nervous sweat. I sat in the front row of the courtroom, flanked by Rowan and Corbin, watching justice move faster than I'd ever imagined possible. Rowan had filed the emergency motion at 8 a.m., and by 10 a.m. we stood before Judge Albright with a stack of evidence that made Kinsley's fraud impossible to deny. The defendant is not present? Judge Albright asked, looking at the empty chair where Kinsley should have been sitting. She was properly served yesterday evening, Rowan replied. Her attorney requested a postponement, but given the ongoing financial harm to my client, we requested an emergency hearing. Judge Albright reviewed the documents quickly but thoroughly. Her reading glasses reflected the overhead lights as she studied Corbin's forensic report, Preston's video transcript, and the forged insurance papers. Occasionally she made small sounds, not quite gasps, but close. Mrs. Dubois, the judge addressed me directly. You're requesting immediate freezing of all property transfers and bank accounts associated with this case. Yes, Your Honor. Kinsley has already withdrawn $40,000 from a home equity loan taken against my property without my knowledge. And she changed the beneficiary on your life insurance policy while you were hospitalized? Yes, ma'am, while I was unconscious. Judge Albright set down the papers and looked directly at me. Her expression reminded me of my third-grade teacher, Mrs. Thompson, kind but absolutely done with nonsense. This is elder abuse, plain and simple. The evidence presented shows systematic fraud designed to transfer this woman's entire estate to someone she's known for 6 months. She picked up her pen. Emergency restraining order granted. All property transfers are frozen, effective immediately. All bank accounts associated with these transactions are frozen. The defendant is prohibited from accessing any joint accounts or making any financial decisions regarding the plaintiff's assets. Rowan squeezed my hand under the table. We also request that Mrs. Dubois be granted exclusive access to her home, Your Honor. Granted. The defendant has 24 hours to remove her personal belongings from the plaintiff's residence. After that, she is prohibited from entering the property. 30 seconds. 50 years of marriage protected by 30 seconds of judicial action. I felt like I could breathe properly for the first time since the wedding. Mrs. Dubois, Judge Albright continued, do you have a safe place to stay while this matter is resolved? My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, has offered her guest room. Good. I'm also ordering that all original documents related to this case be surrendered to the court within 48 hours. Any attempt to destroy evidence will result in contempt charges. The gavel came down with a solid crack that echoed through the empty courtroom. Ever seen a scammer's confidence crumble when real consequences appear? Kinsley's attorney called within an hour. His voice was different, worried. Kinsley's lawyer opened with, "Perhaps we can reach an understanding," before seeing the video evidence spread across Rowan's table. The conference room at Rowan's legal aid office had seen better days, but it served our purpose perfectly. Water-stained ceiling tiles, flickering fluorescent lights, and metal chairs that squeaked when you moved. Not the polished law firm environment where Kinsley's attorney, Mr. Thatcher, usually conducted business. He arrived in an expensive suit and confident smile that faded the moment he saw our preparation. Rowan had arranged the evidence like a prosecutor presenting a murder case: bank records, forged documents, hospital records, and Corbin's computer forensics report organized in neat stacks around Preston's laptop. My client feels there may have been some misunderstandings about the family financial arrangements, Mr. Thatcher began, settling his briefcase on the table. Rowan didn't respond. She simply pressed play on Preston's laptop. Kinsley's voice filled the room through tiny speakers. The old woman won't last long anyway. Kidney failure, diabetes, high blood pressure. Her doctor gives her maybe 2 years. Mr. Thatcher's confident expression cracked slightly. His eyes moved to the hospital records showing I'd been unconscious when the insurance beneficiary was changed. The video continued. Kinsley and the unknown man rifling through my jewelry box, photographing my personal documents, discussing property transfers and trust arrangements like they were planning a business merger instead of destroying an old woman's life. Transfer papers ready by Tuesday? the man's voice asked. Everything's in motion, Kinsley replied. Eleanor signed the property documents last week, thinking they were medical consent forms. Mr. Thatcher reached for his briefcase. I think I need to consult with my client before… Wait, Rowan interrupted. There's more. She pulled up Corbin's forensic analysis on the laptop screen. Timestamps proving documents were created months before Kinsley met Landon. IP addresses tracking the forgeries to Kinsley's computer. Purchase records for fake notary stamps. Your client committed federal crimes, Rowan stated calmly. Wire fraud, mail fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, and conspiracy. The FBI is building a case that could put her away for 10 to 15 years. Mr. Thatcher's face had gone pale. He loosened his tie and cleared his throat. What kind of resolution are you seeking? Full restitution of stolen funds, restoration of all property rights, criminal prosecution for federal crimes, and damages for emotional distress. And if my client were willing to negotiate? Rowan leaned back in her metal chair. That depends on how cooperative she wants to be with federal investigators. They're very interested in the man who helped her photograph documents, and the company in Atlanta that prepared the forged paperwork. The room fell silent, except for the humming fluorescent lights. Mr. Thatcher stared at the frozen video frame showing Kinsley climbing out of the dumpster, my family's papers scattered around her feet. What's more powerful, threats or evidence? When the video ended, Kinsley's attorney asked for 5 minutes to call his client. If you think this confrontation gets intense, subscribe. The final showdown approaches. Corbin's map showed Kinsley's fraud spreading across state lines, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina filings for the same property. The map covered most of Corbin's wall, marked with colored pins and connecting strings that looked like something from a detective movie. Each pin represented a county courthouse where Kinsley had filed documents claiming ownership or interest in my Valdosta home. She filed the trust paperwork in Lowndes County first, Corbin explained, pointing to a red pin. Then identical documents in Clay County, Florida, and Beaufort County, South Carolina. Same property, same legal language, filed within days of each other. Rowan studied the map with a prosecutor's eye. Why multiple counties? Confusion and delay. If anyone challenged the documents in one jurisdiction, she could claim the real paperwork was filed somewhere else. It would take months for court systems to communicate and sort out which filing was legitimate. But none of them are legitimate, I said. Exactly. But by the time that got discovered, she'd have months to liquidate assets, collect insurance money, and disappear. Corbin pulled down another map showing similar patterns in Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. Agent Monroe shared these cases with me yesterday. Same scheme, same document templates, same 3-county filing strategy. The scope made my head swim. You mean there are other families going through this? At least 6 that we know of. All elderly women, all targeted through family connections, all involving jewelry boxes or similar heirlooms that contained important documents. Rowan made notes in her ever-present legal pad. This isn't just Kinsley acting alone. This is organized fraud. Gets worse, Corbin continued. The Atlanta company that prepared the forged documents, they've processed paperwork for all these cases. Someone is running a systematic elder fraud operation across the Southeast. I thought about Kinsley's confident demeanor during the wedding, the way she'd immediately moved into my house, changed my locks, redirected my mail. She'd done this before. I wasn't her first victim. The man in the video, I said. The one helping her photograph my documents. He's probably done this with other families too. Corbin nodded. Agent Monroe is building a federal case. Interstate fraud, organized conspiracy, multiple victims. This could shut down the entire operation. Rowan closed her notepad, which means Eleanor's case becomes crucial evidence for prosecuting everyone involved. Federal prosecutors want to offer Kinsley a deal, Corbin said. Reduced sentence in exchange for information about the larger conspiracy. The idea of Kinsley getting a lighter punishment made my stomach turn, but if it helped other families avoid what I'd been through, maybe it was worth it. How many more victims are out there? I asked. Corbin pointed to pins on the map marked with question marks. Monroe thinks dozens, maybe more. Most elderly victims don't have the resources to fight back, so the crimes go unreported. Rowan's phone call to the FBI took 11 minutes. They were very interested. Agent Monroe had 3 identical cases from Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee, all targeting elderly black women, all involving family jewelry boxes. The FBI field office in Atlanta looked nothing like the TV shows. Gray carpet, beige walls, and the constant hum of copy machines working overtime. Agent Monroe led me through hallways lined with wanted posters and missing person flyers to a conference room where my case file sat among 6 others. "Mrs. Dubois," Agent Monroe said, opening the first folder. "Meet Thelma Mae Strickland from Mobile, Alabama. 74 years old, retired teacher, lost her home through forged documents while recovering from hip surgery." Thelma's photo showed a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, like looking into a mirror 20 years from now. Her jewelry box had been a wedding gift, too, antique mahogany with pearl inlays that held her husband's Navy papers and property deeds. "And this is Wilma Jean Hargrove from Memphis." Agent Monroe opened another file. 81 years old, church organist for 60 years. Her nephew's new girlfriend convinced her to update her will, then filed fraudulent trust papers in 3 states. The pattern repeated across all 6 cases: elderly women targeted through family connections, jewelry boxes or similar heirlooms containing important documents, multi-state fraud filings to confuse court systems and delay investigations. "How did they choose their victims?" I asked. "Church directories, obituaries, real estate records. They look for widowed women who own property and have adult children struggling financially." Agent Monroe pulled out a map marked with red pins. The operation moves systematically across the South, hitting small towns where people trust family connections. Rowan leaned forward. "What about prosecution?" "Federal grand jury is meeting next week. We have enough evidence to indict Kinsley, her associate from the video, and the Atlanta document company. But we need victim testimony to show the pattern." I thought about Thelma Mae Strickland and Wilma Jean Hargrove, women who'd spent decades building something only to watch strangers tear it down. Women who probably felt ashamed, like they'd somehow failed by trusting the wrong people. "Will the other victims testify?" Agent Monroe's expression darkened. 2 can't. Thelma Mae Strickland died of a heart attack 3 months after losing her house. Wilma Jean Hargrove developed dementia, possibly from the stress. "She's in a nursing home now." The room fell silent. Kinsley hadn't just stolen money and property. She'd helped kill Thelma Mae Strickland and destroy Wilma Jean Hargrove's mind. The weight of that truth settled on my chest like a physical thing. "Mrs. Dubois," Agent Monroe continued, "your case is different. You fought back. You have video evidence, forensic proof, and witness testimony. Your courage could shut down this entire network." "What happens to Kinsley?" "If convicted on all federal charges, she's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The document forger faces similar time. The Atlanta company will be shut down permanently. If your family case could help solve others, would you cooperate with federal investigators?" "The jewelry box detail was their signature," Agent Monroe explained. "Kinsley wasn't working alone. This conspiracy runs deeper than anyone imagined. Subscribe to see the whole network exposed." Judge Albright watched Preston's video twice before looking directly at Kinsley. "Explain what I just witnessed." The judge's chambers felt smaller than the courtroom, more personal. Dark wood paneling, law books stacked floor to ceiling, and a single window overlooking the courthouse parking lot where this whole mess began with a wedding reception and a dumpster. Kinsley sat across from me for the first time since the wedding. Her confidence had cracked like cheap paint. No more designer clothes or perfect makeup. Just a woman in a plain gray dress, hands folded in her lap, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. "Your Honor," Kinsley's attorney began, "my client." Judge Albright held up her hand. "I asked Miss Davidson Dubois to explain, not her lawyer." Kinsley's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I can explain everything. Please do." Judge Albright leaned back in her leather chair, pen ready. Landon was drowning in debt. The hardware store was cutting hours, his truck needed repairs, and he couldn't make rent. I just wanted to help him. By forging his mother's signature on property documents? Kinsley's composure finally cracked completely. Tears started flowing, but they felt calculated, rehearsed. "I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt anyone." Rowan opened her briefcase and pulled out hospital records. You changed Mrs. Dubois' insurance beneficiary while she was unconscious in the hospital. You researched claim procedures 3 days after meeting her son. You withdrew $40,000 from a home equity loan without her knowledge. Those were for Landon's debts. Landon's debts totaled $8,000, Rowan continued. Where did the other $32,000 go? Silence. Kinsley stared at her hands while Judge Albright made notes. The video shows you and an associate discussing Mrs. Dubois' life expectancy, Judge Albright said. Quote, "The old woman won't last long anyway." What did you mean by that? More silence. Kinsley's attorney whispered something in her ear, but she just shook her head. Agent Monroe spoke from the back corner. Your Honor, we have evidence linking Miss Davidson Dubois to similar fraud schemes in 6 other states. Elderly victims. Forged documents. Multi-state filings to avoid detection. Judge Albright set down her pen and looked directly at Kinsley. Young woman, you systematically targeted an elderly person, forged legal documents, committed identity theft, and planned to profit from her death. This isn't a mistake or poor judgment. This is criminal enterprise. Kinsley finally looked up, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Landon never knew. He thought everything was legitimate. Landon signed the insurance beneficiary change, I said quietly. He knew enough. Judge Albright nodded. This case will proceed to federal court for prosecution. Bail is set at $1 million, which I suspect you cannot make since the money was stolen. Do you prefer private accountability or public humiliation for justice? Kinsley's first words were, I can explain everything. But Judge Albright raised her hand for silence. $50,000 in damages, full property restoration, and criminal charges dropped. Kinsley's final offer came through her attorney at 4:47 p.m. Rowan spread the settlement documents across her desk like she was dealing cards, each page representing a different piece of my stolen life being returned. The legal aid office had grown quiet as evening approached, just the 3 of us, Rowan, Agent Monroe, and me, weighing whether justice meant punishment or recovery. It's a generous offer, Rowan said carefully. Full restitution of withdrawn funds, transfer of all property back to your name, return of all forged documents, and $50,000 in punitive damages. What's the catch? Agent Monroe leaned forward. Kinsley avoids federal prosecution. She pleads guilty to state charges, gets probation, and the larger conspiracy investigation loses its strongest witness. I thought about Thelma Mae Strickland, dead from a heart attack after losing her home. Wilma Jean Hargrove lost in dementia's fog while strangers spent her life savings. Other women across the South who might become victims if this network stayed in business. How many more families could be saved if Kinsley goes to prison? Hard to say, Agent Monroe admitted. The Atlanta Document Company is shutting down regardless, but Kinsley's associate, the man in the video, might disappear if we can't flip her testimony. The settlement offer guaranteed I'd get my house back, my insurance policy restored, and enough money to handle medical expenses for years. But it also meant Kinsley would be free to hurt someone else's grandmother in another state, another small town where people still trusted family connections. What would Sterling have wanted? I asked aloud. Rowan and Agent Monroe exchanged glances. They couldn't answer that question for me. I remembered Sterling in his army uniform, standing at attention during flag ceremonies at the base. Honor, duty, country, he used to say. Not honor when it was convenient, or duty when it didn't cost anything. Honor and duty, especially when they were difficult. If I take the settlement, what happens to Landon? He's cooperating fully with our investigation, Agent Monroe said. No charges filed. He was manipulated as much as you were. Landon had signed papers he didn't understand, trusted someone he thought loved him, made mistakes that nearly cost his mother everything. But he hadn't planned it. He'd just been weak when he should have been strong. And if I refuse the settlement? Federal trial, probably 6 months away. Kinsley faces 20 years if convicted. You'll testify, relive all of this publicly. No guarantee of financial recovery if her assets get tied up in other victims' claims. The office clock ticked past 5 p.m. Outside, Valdosta was settling into evening routines, families having dinner, children doing homework, neighbors checking mail. Normal life continuing while I decided whether justice meant mercy or punishment. I picked up the pen Rowan had placed next to the settlement papers, the same type of pen Sterling used to sign our mortgage papers in 1974, building the life Kinsley had tried to steal. "I've spent 72 years learning that some things are worth more than money," I said. "Those women in Alabama and Tennessee deserve justice. Their families deserve to know someone fought for them." Rowan nodded slowly. "You're refusing the settlement?" "I'm choosing what Sterling would have chosen. Honor and duty, even when it's hard." "Would you accept financial compensation or demand criminal prosecution?" Eleanor's signature on the settlement agreement took 30 seconds. 50 years of marriage protected in one signature. Landon brought the replacement jewelry box on a Tuesday. Handmade walnut brass hinges and an apology letter inside. He knocked on my front door, my own front door, with my own key working in my own lock at exactly 10 a.m., the same time he used to arrive for our weekly breakfast visits before Kinsley changed everything. Mrs. Gable had driven me home from her guest room the day before, after Judge Albright ordered Kinsley to vacate the premises within 24 hours. The house felt strange and familiar at the same time. My photographs were back on the mantel where they belonged. My coffee cups filled their proper cabinet shelves. Even my lavender potpourri had replaced Kinsley's vanilla candles, though her scent lingered in the hallways like an unpleasant memory. "Mom," Landon said when I opened the door. His hands shook as he held out a wooden box that made my breath catch. Not identical to my grandmother's original, but close enough to honor its memory. "I made this in shop class at the community college. Been working on it for 3 months. The craftsmanship was beautiful. Smooth walnut wood with brass corner pieces that caught the morning light. Tiny hinges that opened without a sound. Inside, purple velvet lining created compartments perfect for rings, necklaces, and important papers. Landon, it's beautiful. Look underneath the lining." I lifted the corner of the velvet and found an envelope with my name written in Landon's handwriting. Inside, a single sheet of paper with words that made my eyes fill with tears. "Mom, I should have protected what you built instead of who I married. I failed you as a son, as a man, and as Sterling Dubois' boy. This box can't replace what was broken, but maybe it can hold what we're building back. I love you. I'm sorry, Landon." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Kinsley had tricked me into signing forged papers, where she'd planned my financial destruction while pretending to care about my medical needs. But today it was just Landon and me, the way it should have been all along. "I filed for divorce yesterday," Landon said quietly. "Before the criminal trial starts, I can't stay married to someone who tried to kill my mother." "She didn't try to kill me, Landon. She just didn't care if I died." "Same thing." I opened the new jewelry box and began filling it with the documents Rowan had recovered. Property deeds, insurance policies, Sterling's military papers, even Landon's old report cards I'd kept all these years. Each item found its place in the soft velvet compartments. "Agent Monroe says the trial will take 2 weeks," Landon continued. "I'll testify for the prosecution, tell them everything I remember about the papers I signed, the lies Kinsley told, the way she isolated you from family. You don't have to testify against your wife. Ex-wife. And yes, I do. It's the least I can do." The jewelry box sat between us on the table, filled with family history and future possibilities. Sterling's purple heart nestled next to our marriage certificate. Landon's birth certificate lay beside the property deed that proved this house belonged to me alone, now and always. "What happens after the trial?" Landon asked. I touched the brass hinges, sturdy and bright. "We rebuild what matters, we protect what we've learned, and we make sure no other family goes through what we did." Can family relationships survive betrayal if there's genuine accountability? The apology letter had one line that made Eleanor cry. "I should have protected what you built instead of who I married." They didn't need loud applause. The elderly women at Mount Olive Baptist Church nodded like people who finally understood their own power. The church basement smelled like coffee and wisdom, the way it had every Thursday morning for the past 20 years when the senior ladies' circle met to discuss scripture, community gossip, and whoever needed prayer that week. But today was different. Today, Agent Monroe sat in a folding chair beside the coffee table, explaining how families like ours could protect themselves from predators who hunted grandmothers. "Mrs. Dubois' courage saved lives," Agent Monroe told the group. Kinsley Davidson pled guilty to federal charges last week. 22 years in prison, no possibility of parole. Her associate received 18 years. The Atlanta document company was shut down permanently. Mrs. Gable squeezed my hand. How many other families? 6 confirmed cases, probably dozens more. The scheme operated for 3 years across 8 states. Mrs. Dubois' testimony broke it open. I looked around the circle at faces I'd known for decades. Widow women mostly, living alone in houses their husbands built, trusting their children and grandchildren to do right by the legacies they'd spent lifetimes creating. Vulnerable women who could have been me, if not for Preston's video and Rowan's determination. The important thing, I told them, is learning to recognize the warning signs. Family members who suddenly become very interested in your paperwork. New girlfriends or boyfriends who ask lots of questions about property and insurance. Anyone who pressures you to sign documents quickly without giving you time to read them or ask questions. Mrs. Calloway, 83 and sharp as her tongue, raised her hand. What about our children? How do we know who to trust? Agent Monroe opened his briefcase and pulled out pamphlets. Trust your instincts. Real family members won't rush you or make you feel stupid for asking questions. They'll want you to understand what you're signing, and they'll never ask you to keep secrets from other family members. The group discussed their own experiences, grandchildren asking for money, new in-laws showing unusual interest in family finances, adult children who suddenly wanted to help with banking and bill paying. Stories that sounded innocent until you knew what to listen for. The other important thing, I added, is community. Kinsley isolated me from friends, made me feel ashamed of my medical condition, convinced me that Landon was my only option for help. If I'd stayed connected to all of you, trusted your opinions about her behavior, things might have turned out differently. Mrs. Gable nodded vigorously. We should have paid more attention, should have visited more after the wedding. It's not your fault, it's Kinsley's fault. But going forward, we watch out for each other. We ask questions when something feels wrong. We offer help before people get desperate enough to trust the wrong person. Agent Monroe left us with his business cards and a promise to check on our little group periodically. After he left, we sat in the familiar circle, processing everything we'd learned. I opened my new jewelry box and showed them the contents. Sterling's medals, our marriage certificate, Landon's baby pictures, the property deed that Kinsley had tried to steal, physical proof that some legacies are worth fighting for. What family legacy would you fight hardest to protect? I asked. Mrs. Calloway touched her wedding ring. Mrs. Gable straightened the cross around her neck. Mrs. Redfield smiled at a photo of her late husband in his Navy uniform. Eleanor touched the new jewelry box's brass hinges and smiled. Some legacies are too precious to lose twice.